Pictured here with his cat, Marsh Moth, on the cover of his latest LP titled Zappa, London Symphony Orchestra Volume 2. Frank Zappa desires to be different, and his diversity works on record or in person. He is the definitive rock music innovator. On For Members Only Television, the legendary Frank Zappa.
Going back on your career, you know, it has been something that has been very unique in terms of what you have done as an artist. But looking back, reflecting back, what could you say has been your most important contribution to American so-called rock music?
By not doing regular stuff, you know, by existing on the fringe of it, just to prove that it could be done.
How's your family?
They're fine. They're all healthy. They're all happy.
You were with a group called the Soul Giants in the 1960s.
62.
Yeah, in Pomona. Was this really your first input into the music at that time?
No. I had worked in bands, excuse me, in high school. I played drums. I changed the guitar when I was 18. And I was with the Soul Giants for a very short period of time because I was invited in as a substitute guitar player. The lead singer at the time had had a fight with the original guitar player and broke his face or something, and I knew the singer. His name was Ray Collins, and he called me up and said, could I come down on a Friday night and substitute for this guy? And so I played with him for a while, and I thought it was a good band, and I thought they should learn some original material and make a record. But the guy who was the leader of the band at the time, his name was Davey Coronado, he felt that if you learned original material, what would happen was you couldn't work in bars because they didn't want to hear original material, and you would get fired, and then you wouldn't have any money, and you wouldn't eat, and you wouldn't have any fun. So he didn't want to do it, and he left. And so we learned some original material, and we found out that Davey Coronado was right. We got fired all over the place, and it was very difficult to maintain steady employment trying to play original music in bands, in bars in Southern California, because basically all that was being hired then was you would go to one bar and it would say, the Mexican Beatles, and over here it would be the Albanian Beatles. There's all these Beatle imitation bands. You get a wig, you get a little suit, learn all the Beatles songs, and you'd stand in there and you would play it. So there was two kinds of bands that the clubs would hire, a band that was a fake Rolling Stones band or a band that was a fake Beatles band, and we weren't either of those. So we got to play in great places, like go-go bars were springing up everywhere. And all you needed was a beer license and 3 girls who would wear ugly costumes and twirl around on a table while construction workers would say amusing things to them, and you had a go-go bar. So somebody had just opened up one of these in Norwalk, and I'm telling you, it was just slightly larger than this room, no bandstand. And we got a gig there for one night, and we had to set all of our equipment up against the wall, and they surrounded us with tables. And these go-go dancers, who were, you know, kind of like war surplus quality go-go dancers, were standing on the tables in front of us, and they smelled really bad. And we got these butts in our faces, and we're up there, you know, playing go-go music for them.
The Mothers of Invention, this was indeed a unique title. Describe this kind of a group at that time.
Well, that title was actually inflicted on us because it was originally just called The Mothers. And we got a contract with MGM Records, and we'd already made the album, and suddenly a guy at the record company said, well, we can't release a record by a group called The Mothers because, you know, that's kind of obscene, and the disc jockeys will never play it. Obviously, he hadn't listened to the record because there was no way a disc jockey was going to play it anyway. So he said, unless we changed the name, they weren't going to put the record out. So I just added Of Invention.
You were an innovator. Phil Spector was also an innovator. Looking back on the music of the late 50s and 60s, can you compare it with today's music?
A lot of today's music is very much the same as early 60s music, except that instead of being played with, you know, the instruments of that era, they're using a lot of synthesizers and stuff, but the chord changes are similar, the types of words are similar, some of the beats are similar, and it's like reruns, you know, Jaws 9.
You are very much into political commentary, also social commentary. There was a comic in the late 40s and 50s who I think set the tone for comedic, social, and political commentary. His name is Lenny Bruce. You knew him.
Yeah.
Give us some input on it.
Well, we were the opening act for Lenny Bruce at one of his last concerts at the Fillmore West, about, I guess it was 1965. And when I first met him, he was in the lobby, and I walked up to him and I asked him to sign my draft card, and he wouldn't do it. And I said, there's no way he was even going to touch anything like that. For those of you who don't know, they used to have these things called draft cards where, you know, that meant that somebody could force you to go kill somebody else against your will. And I didn't hang out with Lenny. He lived not too far away from me, but he spent most of his time working on legal briefs. You know, he became his own attorney because the authorities were always after him for the things that he said. And when he finally died, the guy who was living with him had been doing PA work for us, and you know, he came over and told us that his name was John Judnick. He found the body. Well, it was pretty sad because I think that Lenny was a funny guy and he was smart, and the way in which he was persecuted is pretty inexcusable, I think, because it just shows the terror that exists in the minds of people who own things and run things, that you can't even let one little word leak out. Otherwise, they're afraid the whole structure of what the society is will just crumble down if word leaks out. They don't want you to make fun of it, and they don't want you to say any of those magic words that affects the foundation of the ignorance that represents the worst part of American culture. They don't want it attacked, and so they just they made his life miserable.
You were once a music executive. You had your own record company.
I still have it.
You still have it.
Still do all that stuff.
You know, does this present a challenge to you? By this I mean, having your own company. Is it hard to get distribution, say, with a major label or a major corporate company? Is it hard to get the airplay that, say, you could get with Columbia if you were with them? What are the disadvantages of...
being an independent?
Yeah.
Well, if you are totally independent, that is to say, independent company, independent distribution, you're taking a big risk because in order to move your product around the country, you have to deal with local distributors in each state, and they screw you. See, they have 90 days to pay. You make the record, you ship the record, and end of 90 days, they don't pay you. They give you one of these, and then you have to sue them under the laws of that state in each state. And you can go broke real fast, unless you're driving around the country and selling albums out of a box in the back of your station wagon. When you have to put trust in a local distributor, and you can't afford to back yourself up with you know, some kind of legal muscle, you're going to be in trouble. Which is one of the reasons why small labels often make distribution deals with majors. Like we have a distribution deal with Capitol right now. And the reason for doing that is because it is more difficult for the local guy to stiff Capitol than it would be to stiff an independent, because there's another Duran Duran album coming in 2 months and they want it. And so they have the ability to make collections. And there's a lot of really boring stuff that goes with operating a record company, but there's also a lot of freedom because in my case, I don't have to go to an A&R man and say, well, Joe, what do you think of this? Do you think this is a hit? You know, and a regular guy would have to go there and seek approval from the A&R department. And in fact, in some instances, change their music if the A&R guy says it won't sell. You know, because the whole attitude there is music is only being done to sell.
Part 2 of our interview with Frank Zappa will air next Monday, 11:30 p.m. on this television station.